Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. And in the co-captain's chair today from the Hudson Valley Squares, Mr. Chris Canzoneri, the Cans, is here. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going? How's everybody doing?
Doing good. Snowing here in the Hudson Valley, right?
Yeah,
Before we went on the air, we were just comparing how much snow we each have because we're about 20 miles apart from each other. And yeah, we got a coating.
yeah, had to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, we've gone the whole winter with really nothing that we've had. I think this is what the fourth snow instance, but in every one of them, we've gotten like less than an inch, and within hours or
Yep,
within like 12
melts.
hours, it's gone and melted. So we haven't had any accumulation at all here this entire winter, and it's going to be no different today because I think tomorrow it's going
Yeah,
to the 50s and it'll all be gone. But then we have another one coming, so who the hell knows? Winter in the Northeast. That's
yeah.
yeah. So thanks for joining us on your Sunday, everybody. We've got a band that's been asked for quite a bit, and I knew the right man for the job was the Cans himself, because he is actually the guy who got me into this band quite a number of years ago. They have been around now 20 years. Like, what the hell? From Savannah, Georgia. We're talking about Baroness. And for some of you who are not familiar with the band, it's like, well, Pete, Chris, how would you describe the music of Baroness? Well, I don't even
Mhm.
know. It's they're
Sludge metal, sort of.
sludge metal, psychedelic stoner metal, progressive rock in
Yeah,
spots. I mean,
some proggy elements in there.
yeah, indie rock. There's little elements of what we used to call alternative rock in here. They don't really sit in any little category at all. And
Nope.
we should dig into these albums. Again, we're only talking about five of them, so that they're not the most prolific band on the planet, but they don't really stay in any one place for too long. They've had some years of inactivity, and then they come back, and then again, revisiting this catalog again and going back and forth on these albums over the last couple of weeks. I'm like, yeah, I to this day I still really don't know if someone would walk up to me and say, "Hey, I'm interested in this band Baroness. How would you describe them?" I don't know. I would just throw everything we
Heavy.
just threw at them, right?
Everything they do is pretty heavy, though. They're
For the most
hard.
part, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. And there's an element too, and we'll probably get into this with a couple of their albums. There's like a little space rock thing going on some of these albums too, which I guess is kind of like the psychedelic part of it.
yeah.
But yeah, cool band. They've had a couple guys that have been pretty constant in the band, but they've had quite a few lineup changes along the way too. They had this crazy bus accident that they were on back in 2012, and then
Yeah.
thankfully nobody got seriously hurt, or no one got killed, I don't think. But a bunch of them were hospitalized, and it took them a while to get back into the swing of things. But yeah, five albums. We've ranked them from our least favorite to our favorite. And I'll have Chris kick us off with his number five.
Okay. Number five. This is their third album. It's called Yellow and Green. This was the tour they were on when they got into the aforementioned bus crash, which kind of slowed them down for a few years. That's probably my least favorite cover art. The leader of the band, John Baisley, does all their cover art.
Yeah.
And he does art for other bands too, like Velar Talk and I think Red Fang and a couple others. But yeah, everything he does art wise is fucking great. You should check out all these albums and enjoy the art. But Yellow and Green was a very different album from the first two. It was kind of a grand experiment. They expanded the length of the album. They decided to do some sort of interludes and slower passages. And I think the thing that lowered this album for me from the other ones, the heavier stuff they did, I think they went a lot more straightforward with it than they had been. Like the song Take My Bones Away, which was the single on the album. It's heavy, it kicks ass, it's a rocking song, but it's a rock and roll song. It's not experimental and trippy and weird like some of their other stuff. But that's probably my favorite song on the album. Little Things is another great one. Lines Between, another killer song. But overall, the album was a big left turn from the first two. And at the time, I bought this on release day and whatever, and I was not ready for this. And I'm kind of slow to move, but these guys took a big turn. I didn't quite make it all the way there with them, but you got to appreciate a band that wants to change and grow and explore new territory. And they did that with this album, but I think they did better later with the same kind of ideas. So number 5, Yellow and Green.
Well, you basically, I was sitting there listening to him. Like, did you like secretly like sneak into my house and look at my notes? Because that's kind of exactly where I was going to go here. That's my number 5 as well. And for all the reasons you just stated, this is basically a double album. I think my issue with this album, I think the songwriting is there because there's some really good stuff on here, but it's very different. Like you said, to me, it's not nearly heavy enough. The heavy moments are few and far between. There's a lot of songs, a lot of interludes, which we'll see on another album coming up as well. And it meanders a little bit, but I mean, there's some really interesting things going on here. Like Cocainium is like really cool, like kind of psychedelic pop. Again, I wouldn't expect it from these guys, but I think it's pretty cool. You mentioned Little Things, Twinkler. They've got these kind of like indie rock elements. You're probably thinking, well, Pete, what the hell is indie rock? Yeah, I don't even know what indie rock is, but it's a term we throw out all the time when something it's kind of pop, it's kind of jangly, kind of rocking, right? But it's whatever. I like March to the Sea, which really grabs you instantly. But you mentioned something before that really hits home here. It's more like a straightforward rock song. And this is from a band on their first 2 albums that they didn't do straightforward rock songs. So like March to the Sea and Take My Bones are really good. They're kind of heavy and catchy, but they're really straightforward. So, and there's some prog going on here, like Sea Lungs, kind of heavy, kind of drifts around a little bit. Eula has some prog overtones. John's vocals are really good on the album, I think. But overall, it's maybe just deviating a bit too much from their formula. And I totally agree with it. Give them kudos for doing something different. It doesn't all work for me, though. Parts of it I really like. Parts of it I just really don't have any use for. So for me, this was an easy pick for number 5, Yellow and Green from 2012. Back to you.
Okay, my number 4, which if you didn't know the band, you would think that chronologically this was the next album after Yellow and Green, but it's not. This is their latest album, Golden Gray. They followed sort of the same formula, kind of a double album, a lot of experimentation, a lot of new instrumentation, killer artwork as usual. Probably my number 1 for the artwork.
Oh yeah, I love this. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
This was their second album with Dave Fridman producing, and to me, I know Dave Fridman from his work with Flaming Lips, which is some out there shit. And you can tell, and this is the second album, and we'll talk more about Dave Fridman later, but he I think finally exerted his influence with Flaming Lips style production and kooky sounds in the studio and stuff like that. But overall, I think the experimentation is more successful than on Yellow and Green. And I think the heavier songs that are on this album are better than the heavier songs on Yellow and Green. Front Toward Enemy, Throw Me an Anchor, Seasons. These are kick-ass heavy tunes. And even the interlude stuff, I think they and they used to do this. These little interludes were more like intros to the next song. There may be a little thematic element that carries over, and a lot of these work that way on this album. It's just
they're a little longer.
Yeah, and it's not as tight as I expected and want them to be with an album. It's maybe they were indulging themselves a little bit, and maybe they were indulging Dave Fridman's ideas too. Because if you listen to some of these, like the heyday Lips albums that he did, there's a lot of, let's hang out for 10, 15 minutes. Well, not that long, but, maybe 2-3 minutes and just twinkle around and do some little sounds and whatever. And then, there's a couple Lips songs, it's 5 minutes of just some guy screaming in the background over an organ or something, But you can see where he was bringing these ideas to Baroness, and they were digging it. But overall, better than Yellow and Green for sure. Not a bad album. I dig it. Just could have been edited down a little bit. So
once again, we are on the same page here. That is also my number 4. What really disappoints me about this album is you bring in a new guitar player. So Gina Gleason, right? Who's, carries a little bit of a name with her. she really doesn't do much of anything on this album. This is really not a guitar heavy album, which I think was a little disappointing for me. But I agree with you. I think this is very similar to the last one we talked about. It's almost like the sequel for me because it's very similar. It's long, a lot of songs, a lot of these kind of now lengthier little interludes. Again, a weird mix of styles here. It's kind of proggy, it's kind of alternative, it's kind of space rock, it's heavy in spots. It's very like I'd Do Anything is like really, there's a lot of tracks like that. They're kind of like emotional and dripping with melancholy, which is kind of interesting. Kind of like, like a US version of Anathema in spots for me. But there's some really good stuff on here, like Front Toward Enemy, upbeat, catchy. I like Nick Jost, the bass player. His bass work is very prominent in the mix on this whole album, which I kind of dig. The vocals are good. I'm Already Gone is kind of hypnotic. Tourniquet's got this kind of space rock meets alternative pop thing going on. Broken Halo rocks pretty hard. Pale Sun, again, kind of space rocky, right? Me drifting, meandering kind of thing. Again, another really experimental album. I wish it was heavier, and I wish we heard a little more guitar, especially from the new chick in the band. But and a lot of keyboards. I think for those who are watching this who are more into like prog rock than they are into metal, this might be the album for you to start with, because this is very, very experimental, a little tighter than the other album we just talked about, but lots of keyboards and lots of different kind of passages and song structure. But it's good. I don't love it, but I definitely like it better than the Yellow album. And I think it'll really be interesting to see, because this came out in 2019 and they're working on a new one that I think is almost ready. It'll be interesting to see what the new album sounds like based on where this went. So we'll see. But yeah, that's my number 4 as well.
Okay, my number 3. This was their first album with Dave Fridman, but he did not do anything like I expected him to do, especially following up Yellow and Green. I'm talking about Purple, which was the first album they did after a long layoff from the bus crash. And after Yellow and Green and after all this time, I really had no idea what they would do. And they came back with a straightforward, tight, ass-kicking metal album.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was like, fuck, man, they can still fucking do it. They can do it. I mean, this song, like Shock Me, it's my second favorite song, called Shock Me. That song kicks ass. I mean, I never thought I would have.
I have to ask, what's your first?
I can't remember, but I like it a little better than this. Kiss, that, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. That Ace Frehley guy did that, right?
Yeah, that guy, the weirder one. The one who he was a plumber, actually. That was his makeup. I'm a plumber. But yeah, I mean, Shock Me, Kerosene, Morning Star, Desperation Burns. I mean, just heavy top to bottom, focused, not too long. I dug the album. They made a nice hard rock and roll album. Not what I expected from at that point, but very enjoyable. Tons of great tracks. Shock Me, killer song. Yeah. And I think they won a Grammy for that, actually. I think they won a Grammy for that.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, it's a great song. It's a great song.
Yeah.
Well, we're right in line again. That is my number 3 also. You know what? If someone after this show, or anybody watching who never listened to this band, where's the best place to start? I would probably recommend this one as the best place to start, because I think, to me, this is the most accessible album, but it still kicks ass, and it's got a ton of variety on it. You have a little bit of everything. The heavy Baroness is on here, the kind of proggy Baroness is on here, the real catchy and accessible Baroness is on here, the little bit of space rock and psychedelia is on here. This is, to me, their most well-rounded album. It's not necessarily my favorite album, but it's the most well-rounded. I think the band sounds fresh and energized here after the bus crash and taking some time away. You got Nick Jost is now in the band on bass and keyboards. Sebastian Thompson's joining on drums. They really sound like they're pumped up and ready to go. I mean, I love Morning Star. Plenty heavy, plenty melodic, big riffs, intricate little guitar melodies. I mean, that's what I like from this band, right? I like the big fat riffs and the little kind of mastodon-y things that they do, because I think the one band at their peak who they remind me of is maybe a less prog metally mastodon, because they do a lot of those weird little widdly bits and things from time to time, and they definitely mix up their stuff a lot. Try to Disappear is just absolutely crushing. Kerosene, like you mentioned, so much fun. I mean, that's a really, really, really accessible track, but still heavy and fast-paced, kick-ass, nice synths, got a little prog rock feel to it. Chlorine, Wine, I mean, the Iron Bell, nice anthem. It's a really strong album, If it wasn't for the other two albums, this would easily be my favorite, I think, but there's a reason why the other two are up there. But again, folks watching, you're not all that familiar with this band, start here. Start with Purple. I think that's your best bet to get you into the band and all they're about. And if you start, the beginning of the catalog, which we're going to get into obviously in a second, is definitely their heavier stuff, and then the rest of the way is very experimental. But this kind of combines both worlds. So yeah, Purple is number 3.
I'm just thinking there's a band called Kylesa that is kind of close. I think they're from Savannah also, and they hung out with these guys, but they're in that same realm as them and Mastodon. Another band to check out.
It's another good point. Yep, for sure.
So my number 2 is their first album, Red Album. This is a heavy, crazy album. This is, of course, the first one I ever heard. This song, Raise on Pinion. When you hear this song, I think you know what these guys are about. This is just crushing drums, acrobatic riffs, just very heavy, sludgy, meandering all over, but still just going someplace that you want to be. Just a kick-ass album. I think actually that they had 2 out when I first heard this. I did listen to this first, and this is the album that made me a fan. Teeth of a Cogwheel is another great song.
Yeah.
They were still, well, not still, but I mean, they started out a little bit experimental, a little bit, doing some stuff that was not quite fast and hard all the time, but even the slower stuff on here is just heavy as hell. And for a first album, very creative, very accomplished. And if you don't start with Purple, start with Red Album, I think, because it's pretty indicative of where they were early on. And I think, before they started changing a little bit and experimenting with different kinds of things, I think this is, they probably did this for a few years before they started making records. Yeah. And it kicks ass. I love it. So.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely think if you so again, based on what I said before, if you enjoy heavier music, then definitely the first 2 albums is probably the best place to go. If you like kind of heavy stuff, but you're more into catchier fare, melodic fare, and prog, then Purple is your way to go. Once again, I'm amazed. Chris and I have the exact same ranking of this catalog. So I have the Red Album at number 2 as well from 2007. Great tracks on here. Raise on Pinion, I like the slow build to that stuff. It's kind of hypnotic. John's vocals just spot on. Late in the song, you get this big burst of heavy riffing, which I think is terrific. The birthing just absolutely crushes. Isaac, another just barn burner, which is just some the riffs on this album are just great. And then you have Wailing Wintry Wind, which shows their psychedelic side. You get the little acoustic thing, Cockroach and Fleur. You get Wanderlust, which has all these kind of cool, interesting, like psychedelic guitar textures and what. Teeth of the Cogwheel is great. Oh, Appalachia is great. And then, which is a great kind of like slow, sludgy type of thing, man. I think this is a really, really great album. And amazingly enough, it's bested, I think, just a little bit by another one, which Chris is going to intro right now.
Okay, number 1, Blue Record.
Yeah,
their second album. They maintained all the heaviness from the first album. They did start to experiment a little, and I think they really brought in some melody to all the bombastic craziness that was going on in the first album. Sweetest Curse, Jake Leg, killer songs. And this contains my favorite moment of theirs. There's a song called Ogeechee Hymnal, which is like one of those intros, and it goes into a song called A Horse Called Golgotha. And that Ogeechee Hymnal is very, slow and melodic, and then they just rip into this next song. and the way the two mesh together, it's just like perfect. And I think they've been kind of chasing that on like Gold and Gray and Yellow and Green when they're doing all the interludes and then on into something else. And I think it works best here.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful piece of music besides being heavy, and I think they added a lot of atmosphere here. They kept it heavy, but they made it melodic, and I dig this album. I mean, if you're gonna listen to this band, you gotta own this one. If you're only gonna own one, I'd say go ahead and get Blue Record. So
yeah. I mean, it's their best. I mean, to me anyway, and to the both of us. You know what? In revisiting this, as I was listening to this album, I think the best point of reference I can make of a band kind of doing what they're doing here is Mastodon's second album, Leviathan, which is where I think they took that early kind of post-hardcore and sludge thing that they were doing on their first album and brought in all this kind of prog and experimentation on Leviathan with, obviously lyrically it was on a different level too. And I think that's kind of like what they're going for here. And, you mentioned a horse called Golgotha, which is terrific. One of my favorite tracks on here. The drumming on there is absolutely amazing. There's some really, really busy, intricate drumming going on this entire album. And I love all these little guitar fills and things that are happening. So they're not just doing big heavy riffs. They got all this other intricate stuff going on, which is really, really good. But yeah, it's a nice mix of sludge and prog metal, and like The Sweetest Curse is incredible. Great song. Jake Leg, heavy. Steel That Sleeps the Eye that's kind of like their psychedelic kind of pop song on the album, which I think is really neat. And they do that a lot on some of the later albums. Swollen and Halo, again, really heavy. Man, the gnashing is really good. That's kind of grimier and sludgy. Bull's Head Lament again is kind of spooky, ominous, very psychedelic. A little bit of everything here. The production is spot on. The guitar sound is immense. Loads of atmosphere, great drumming. This is, again, if you like the heavier end of the spectrum, this is the one you want. If you want a little bit more kind of accessibility, go for this one. I would easily say these are probably your two best to start with, but you got to squeeze this one in here too. So these should be your first three, regardless.
You should buy them all eventually.
Yeah, because you can find these pretty easy. They're not expensive, and if you do physical stuff, and if you just want to get the download or stream them, they should be available on Spotify. All these albums, right? I would think.
Yeah, they are. Well, I have Apple Music. I mean, that's where I listen to them. But yeah. You get
a really good band. And again, it's kind of cool that we're doing this now because apparently I'm assuming the new one will be out sometime this year. I know they've been working on it for a while. I don't know if you've heard any other information on that, but
I know it's overdue. That's all I know.
Yeah, because they put the other one out right before COVID hit. So you have that. But I know they were already tinkering with stuff. So hopefully we'll see something this year, if not this year, next year. But they are way overdue, and it'll be really interesting to see where they go.
Yeah.
So again, we have the same ranking. So Blue Record number 1, the Red Album number 2, Purple number 3, Golden Gray number 4, and of course Yellow and Green number 5. So if you are a fan of the band, let us know how you would rank these down in the comments below. Be interesting to see what other fans come up with with this catalog, because to me it was fairly clear, but you never know. There might be some who like.
I'm sure there's people that would put Golden Gray number 1. I mean,
yeah.
If you approach them from that spot, that may be where you want to stay. So.
And that album was very well received when it came out. So
it's a great album.
Different. Yeah. So cool. So there you have it, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Coming up next week on Ranking the Albums, I'm not quite sure which episode is coming up next week. I have a bunch of things that I'm working on, so I'll probably have more information on that over the next couple of days. But till then, Check out the both of us, obviously, on Monday, every other Monday night on the Hudson Valley Squares. And what do we got coming up this week? In fact, Hudson Valley Squares are tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. We've also got the Monsters Den coming up this week. Friday morning at the Fun House with Martin Popoff Friday morning, as well as 4 Fusion Friday morning. And then we'll be back here on Sunday here on Ranking the Albums. So till then, enjoy the rest of your weekend. For Chris Canzoneri, I am Pete Pardo. We'll see you all real soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take it easy.